They left a Navy SEAL to die in a canyon. What his dog found next exposed a secret powerful men buried for decades. The wind cut across the Wyoming valley as Daniel Mercer stepped into a town that had already decided he didn't belong. With nothing but a worn land deed and a loyal German shepherd at his side, he was seen as just another drifter, until the men who owned everything tried to erase him. But in a canyon meant to swallow the truth, his dog would uncover something no one was supposed to find. Comment 1 if you'd fight back, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. The wind came down from the Wyoming mountains like something that had forgotten how to be gentle. It swept through the valley in long, cold breaths, carrying dust, the smell of dry sage, and the quiet weight of a place that didn't care who you were or where you came from. The town of Briar's End sat at the edge of that valley, half a dozen streets, a diner with a flickering sign, and a row of buildings that looked like they had been holding their breath for decades. Daniel Mercer stepped off the cracked shoulder of the highway and into it like a man who expected nothing. His boots were worn smooth at the edges. His jacket carried the kind of dust that didn't brush off, and beside him, moving with silent precision, was Atlas. The German shepherd stayed just half a step behind Daniel's left leg, his eyes scanning everything: the empty sidewalks, the slow turn of a pickup truck at the far end of the street, the man leaning in the doorway of the diner who stopped talking when he saw them. Atlas didn't bark. He didn't need to. Daniel paused at the edge of the road, looking up at the sign nailed crooked above a weathered post. Briar's End. He let out a slow breath, steady and controlled, the way he had been taught years ago in places where breathing wrong could get you killed. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. Atlas shifted closer, brushing lightly against his leg. "I'm good," Daniel murmured, though his voice carried no conviction. The dog's ears flicked, but he didn't move away. They walked into town together. No one greeted them. No one asked where they were headed. Conversations dimmed just enough to be noticeable as they passed, then picked back up once they were gone. It wasn't hostility. It was something colder. Indifference sharpened by suspicion. Daniel had seen it before. Places like this didn't forget. They just didn't speak. He crossed to the far side of the street and stopped in front of a narrow building with peeling paint and a window clouded by dust. A faded sign read, "County Land and Records." For a moment, he didn't move. His hand slipped into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges softened from being carried too long. He didn't need to open it. He already knew every crease, every word written across it. His brother's name sat there in ink that hadn't quite faded. Evan Mercer. Daniel's jaw tightened. A memory pushed forward. Laughter over a cheap campfire, the smell of burnt coffee, Evan's voice saying, "It's not much, Dan, but it's something. It's ours." The memory broke apart just as quickly as it came. Daniel folded the paper once more and stepped inside. The office was dim, lit by a single overhead bulb that hummed faintly. Behind a desk cluttered with files sat a woman in her 60s, glasses low on her nose, pen moving slowly across a ledger. She didn't look up right away. "Help you?" she said after a moment, her tone flat, but not unkind. Daniel placed the folded document on the desk. "I'm here about a land claim," he said. She glanced up then, eyes moving from his face to the dog at his side, then down to the paper. She opened it carefully, smoothing it out with practiced fingers. The silence stretched. Atlas stood still, but his posture changed. Subtle, almost invisible. His head lifted slightly. His gaze shifted past the woman, toward the window. Daniel noticed. He always did. The woman let out a quiet breath. "This plot," she said, tapping the paper lightly. "You know where this is?" "Red Scar Gorge," Daniel replied. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ain't nothing out there," she said. "Rock, heat, trouble if you go too far in." "It was filed under my brother's name," Daniel said. "He passed. I'm next of kin." She looked at him more carefully then, something softer flickering behind the caution. "I heard about that," she said quietly. "Few months back. Folks said he got lost out there." Daniel didn't answer, because lost wasn't the word he would have used. She cleared her throat and reached for another file, flipping through pages. "Legally, it's yours," she said after a moment. "No one else claimed it. Taxes are current, paid up." Daniel frowned slightly. "Paid by who?" She hesitated. "That's the strange part," she said. "Anonymous deposit. Came in the same week your brother was reported missing." The room seemed to narrow. Atlas let out a low, almost inaudible rumble. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the window. Outside, across the street, a black truck had pulled up without him noticing. It idled there, engine low, like it had been waiting. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, clean boots that had never known dust for long. He wore a hat low over his eyes, but Daniel could still feel the weight of his gaze from across the glass. The woman behind the desk followed his line of sight and went quiet. "That's Clifford Boone," she said under her breath. "Owns most of this valley." Boone didn't wave, didn't smile. He just stood there, watching. Atlas moved closer to Daniel's leg, pressing in just enough to be felt. Daniel folded the paper slowly and slipped it back into his jacket. "Appreciate it," he said to the woman. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the man outside. "Be careful where you go," she said. Daniel gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and turned toward the door. The bell above it chimed softly as he stepped back into the wind. Boone hadn't moved. They stood facing each other across the street, the distance between them filled with dust and silence. Daniel walked forward anyway. Atlas stayed tight at his side. Every step measured. Boone's eyes tracked them the entire way. "You Mercer?" Boone asked when Daniel was close enough. His voice was calm, too calm. Daniel stopped a few feet away. "That's right." Boone's gaze flicked briefly to Atlas, then back to Daniel. "Heard your brother had ideas about that land," Boone said. "Big ones for a place that's nothing but rock." Daniel said nothing. Boone smiled slightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Some things out here are better left alone," he added. "People who don't understand that tend to get themselves hurt." The wind picked up, tugging at Daniel's jacket. Atlas's ears went forward. Daniel met Boone's stare without blinking. "Good to know," he said. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Daniel stepped past him. Atlas followed, and Boone turned just enough to watch them go. That night, the town went quiet early. Lights blinked out one by one until Briar's End was nothing more than shadows and the distant hum of wind against wood. Daniel had made camp just beyond the edge of town, near a line of scrub where the land began to rise toward the mountains. A small fire crackled low, more for heat than light. Atlas lay nearby, head up, eyes reflecting the flames. Daniel sat with his back against a rock, staring into the dark. The canyon waited out there. He could feel it, like something unfinished. He reached into his jacket again, pulling out the folded paper, turning it over in his hands. "Should have been here with you," he muttered. Atlas shifted, rising slowly to his feet. His body went still. Every muscle tightened. Daniel looked up. The night had changed. It was subtle, a shift in the air, a sound that didn't belong. Footsteps. Too quiet for someone who didn't know how to move. Daniel pushed himself up, heart already beginning to pound, not from fear, but from recognition. Ambush. Atlas moved to his side instantly, low and ready. Shapes emerged from the dark. 3 of them. One stepped forward. Moonlight caught his face just enough. "Clifford Boone, you should have left," Boone said quietly. Daniel's breath slowed, controlled. "Not my habit," he replied. Boone sighed, almost regretful. "That's the problem." The first blow came fast. A strike from behind, hard enough to knock the air from Daniel's lungs. He staggered, turned, swung back, connecting once before another hit caught him across the ribs. Atlas lunged, teeth flashing, driving one man back with a snarl that cut through the night. But there were too many. Daniel fought the way he had been trained, efficient, brutal, but his body wasn't what it used to be. Pain slowed him. Hunger weakened him. A fist caught his jaw, another to his side. He went down hard. Atlas barked, once, sharp, furious, before someone struck him, sending him tumbling into the dirt. "Easy with the dog," Boone said. "We're not here for it." Hands grabbed Daniel, hauling him up. He tasted blood. "Where is it?" Boone asked, his voice low now. Daniel laughed once, a dry, broken sound. "If I knew," he said, "you wouldn't be asking." Boone studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Fair enough." They dragged Daniel toward the truck. Atlas staggered to his feet, limping but relentless, trying to follow. "Leave it," Boone said. The truck roared to life. They drove without headlights once they left the road, cutting across rough ground toward the dark outline of the canyon. Red Scar Gorge. Daniel felt it before he saw it. The drop in temperature, the hollow sound of wind moving through stone. They stopped at the edge. The world fell away into darkness. One of the men shoved Daniel forward. He stumbled, boots scraping loose rock. Boone stepped close behind him. "You and your brother should have listened," he said quietly. Daniel turned his head slightly. "Yeah," he rasped. "To what?" Boone's voice dropped to a whisper. "To silence." The shove came without warning, a hand between his shoulders. The ground vanished. For a split second, There was nothing. Then gravity took him. Rock tore at his clothes. Pain exploded through his body as he slammed, rolled, hit again. The world became a blur of impact and dust and darkness. Somewhere above, Atlas barked. Then even that disappeared. Daniel hit the canyon floor hard enough to drive the breath from his lungs. He lay there, unable to move, the sky a narrow strip of black far above. Silence settled over everything. Heavy, absolute, and final. That was the feeling that settled over Daniel Mercer as the last echoes of his fall died against the walls of Red Scar Gorge. For a long moment, he couldn't tell if he was alive. There was no wind down here, no distant hum of engines, no sound of the world above continuing without him. Just a heavy, pressing silence that seemed to crawl into his ears and stay there. Then came the pain. It didn't arrive all at once. It built, slow, deliberate, like something waking up inside his body. A sharp stab along his ribs when he tried to breathe. A deep ache in his shoulder. Warmth spreading down his side that he knew, without looking, was blood. Daniel drew in a breath. It caught halfway. He closed his eyes, forcing himself still. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. The old rhythm came back like muscle memory etched deeper than thought. He clung to it, riding it through the pain until the panic that threatened to rise in his chest began to loosen its grip off. Barely, but alive. His fingers moved first, digging into the gritty earth beneath him. Then his arms, trembling as they pushed him up an inch at a time. His vision blurred, dark at the edges, but slowly the world came back into shape. Stone. Dust. A narrow strip of sky far above, barely wider than his outstretched hand. Daniel rolled onto his side. The movement sent a bolt of pain through his ribs so sharp it stole his breath again. He clenched his jaw, waiting for it to pass. "Stay with it," he muttered under his breath. "Stay with it." A sound broke the silence. Soft, uneven, a low whine. Daniel's head snapped toward it, Atlas. The name came out rough, almost lost in the still air. There was a scrape of movement somewhere to his right. A shadow shifted against the rocks, then another sound, a quiet, determined shuffle. Atlas emerged from the darkness. He limped heavily, one front paw held just off the ground, fur matted with dust and something darker. But his eyes, sharp, focused, locked onto Daniel the moment he saw him. The dog didn't hesitate. He crossed the uneven ground in quick, uneven steps and pressed himself against Daniel's side with a force that was both urgent and careful. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Yeah," he whispered, resting a hand against Atlas's neck. "You made it." Atlas's body was tense, vibrating with something close to anger. His ears flicked constantly, tracking every non-existent sound, every shift of light. But he stayed pressed against Daniel, solid and warm and real. Daniel's hand moved slowly over him, checking. Easy, easy. He found the injury, a shallow cut along the paw, bleeding but not deep, painful but not crippling. "You'll live," Daniel said quietly. Atlas huffed once, as if that had never been in question. Daniel let his hand rest there for a moment longer, grounding himself in the simple fact that he wasn't alone. Then he looked up. The canyon walls rose straight up on every side, sheer, jagged, and impossibly high. Red stone baked by years of sun, streaked darker where shadows clung. There were no ledges, no easy paths, just a vertical prison carved into the earth. Red Scar Gorge. He'd heard the name before. Never like this. They weren't bluffing, he murmured. Atlas shifted slightly, turning his head upward as well. There was no way out. Not the way they had come. Daniel pushed himself into a sitting position, back against a slab of rock. The movement made his vision swim again, but he held it steady, breathing through the pain. He needed to assess. Ribs, at least one cracked, maybe two. Shoulder strained, not dislocated. Head, clear enough. He looked down at his hands. Scraped raw, but functional. Could be worse. It had been worse. A sudden sound broke through his thoughts. A sharp crack. Stone shifting somewhere above. Daniel's body reacted before his mind could catch up. His shoulders tensed, breath hitching as the sound echoed through the canyon. Gunfire. The memory hit hard and fast. Dust kicked up in a different canyon, voices shouting, the metallic snap of rounds hitting rock, the smell of heat and smoke and something burning. Down, someone had yelled. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. His vision narrowed. For a second, he wasn't in Wyoming anymore. He was back there. Atlas moved instantly. The dog pressed into him, harder this time, forcing contact. His weight shifted against Daniel's chest, anchoring him. A low, steady pressure, familiar and deliberate. Daniel's breath came fast, shallow. In through the nose, he whispered, though his voice shook. Hold. Out. Atlas didn't move, didn't break contact. The world slowly came back into focus, stone. Silence. No gunfire, just a single loosened rock tumbling somewhere far above, its sound fading into nothing. Daniel let his head fall back against the rock. Not there, he said quietly. Not anymore. Atlas eased slightly, but didn't step away. Daniel reached up, gripping the thick fur at the back of the dog's neck for a moment. Good boy, he said, voice steadier now. The canyon returned to its heavy quiet. No voices, no footsteps. Boone and his men were gone. They hadn't even bothered to check if he was dead. Daniel let out a dry laugh that didn't carry far. Efficient, he muttered. He shifted again, this time more carefully, testing his weight. Pain flared, but he managed to get one knee under him, then the other. Standing took longer. Atlas stayed close, adjusting his position with every movement, ready to catch him if he faltered. When Daniel finally straightened, the world tilted slightly, then settled. He looked around again. The canyon floor stretched unevenly in both directions, narrow, winding, broken by scattered boulders and patches of loose stone. Heat radiated up from the ground even now, stored from the day. No water. No shade worth mentioning. No clear path. This is where they leave things to disappear, Daniel said quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. Daniel took a slow step forward, then another. Every movement hurt, but he forced himself to keep going. Standing still wasn't an option. Not here. They moved along the base of the canyon wall. Daniel scanning for anything. Cracks, ledges, signs of a path. Atlas moved slightly ahead now, limping but purposeful, nose low to the ground. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time didn't move the same way down here. The silence pressed in harder the farther they went. Daniel's throat felt dry already. That was faster than it should have been. He stopped. "Hold up," he said. Atlas turned back immediately, coming to his side. Daniel crouched slowly, ignoring the protest from his ribs, and picked up a handful of dirt. It crumbled between his fingers, fine, powdery, lifeless. No moisture, no sign of water. He let it fall. "This place kills slow," he said. Atlas watched him, head slightly tilted. Daniel looked down the length of the canyon again. The walls didn't change. The sky didn't widen. Nothing gave. The weight of it settled in. Not panic this time. Something colder. Understanding. They hadn't just been thrown somewhere hard to escape. They had been placed somewhere designed to finish the job. Daniel exhaled slowly. "All right," he said under his breath. "Then we don't play by its rules." Atlas's tail gave a small, tight movement. Daniel pushed himself back to his feet. The pain was still there. The canyon was still impossible. But something had shifted. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was thinking, planning. And somewhere deep under the pain and the silence, something stubborn and unyielding began to rise. "Let's move," he said. Atlas turned forward without hesitation. Together, they stepped deeper into the canyon. Not because there was a way out, but because standing still meant accepting the ending that had been written for them. And Daniel Mercer had never been good at accepting endings. They moved deeper into Red Scar Gorge. The canyon narrowed as they went, the walls pressing closer together, bending the light into thin, uneven strips that barely reached the ground. The air grew heavier, hotter, as if the sun had been trapped here and refused to leave. Daniel's steps slowed. Not by choice. Every breath scraped against his ribs, each one reminding him exactly how far from whole he was. Sweat ran down his back, soaking into his shirt, drying almost as quickly as it formed. His throat felt tight, already too dry. Atlas stayed just ahead now, limping but steady. The dog's head was low, nose working constantly, drawing in the world in ways Daniel couldn't. Every few steps, Atlas paused, scanning, listening, then moved again. Daniel watched him. Trust wasn't something he gave easily. But Atlas wasn't asking for it. He was earning it. "Find something," Daniel muttered, voice rough. "Anything." They walked for what felt like hours. The canyon offered nothing in return. No shade, no sound, no sign that anything had ever lived here, let alone survived. Just stone and dust, and the relentless weight of silence. Daniel stopped again, leaning one hand against the canyon wall. His vision blurred slightly. Not good. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to steady. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. The rhythm came slower this time. Weaker. Atlas circled back immediately. The dog pressed against Daniel's leg, then nudged his hand with his nose, firm, insistent. "I'm fine," Daniel said. Atlas didn't move, didn't accept it. Daniel let out a short breath, something close to a tired laugh. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Didn't think you would." He pushed off the wall and straightened. "We keep moving." Atlas hesitated for half a second, then turned, not forward, to the right. Daniel frowned. "There's nothing that way." The canyon wall there looked no different than anywhere else. Solid rock, broken only by scattered debris and the occasional shallow crack that went nowhere. Atlas stepped toward it anyway. One step, then another. He stopped near a cluster of boulders piled against the wall, remnants of an old rockfall. His body went still, ears forward, tail rigid. A low rumble built in his chest. Daniel watched him for a moment, then shook his head. "Not now," he said. "We need a way out, not a dead end." He turned, taking a step back the way they had come. Atlas didn't follow. The rumble deepened. Daniel stopped, turned back. The dog hadn't moved, just stood there, staring at the ground near the base of the rocks. "Atlas," Daniel said, sharper now. Still nothing. The dog lowered himself into a sit, planted, refusing. Daniel exhaled slowly, irritation flickering through the exhaustion. "Don't do this," he muttered. He took a step toward Atlas, then another. Up close, the ground looked the same as everywhere else. Dry, cracked, lifeless. But Atlas's focus never wavered. Daniel crouched, wincing as his ribs protested, and ran his fingers through the dirt. It shifted easily, too easily. He paused, looked closer. The color was different, subtle, darker. He pressed his palm down. Cool. Not by much, but enough. Daniel's brow furrowed. "That's not—" He started, then stopped. He scraped away a thin layer of dust. Underneath, the soil clumped slightly instead of falling apart. He rubbed it between his fingers. There was resistance. Moisture. Barely there, but real. Daniel looked up sharply, scanning the canyon again. "No," he said under his breath. "That doesn't make sense." Everyone knew Red Scar Gorge, dry as bone. That was the story. That was the rule. Atlas shifted slightly, then pawed once at the ground. Not digging. Pointing. Daniel followed the motion. A thin line, no wider than a finger, ran along the base of the rocks, darker than the surrounding dirt, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, or unless you knew it was there. Daniel traced it with his eyes. It disappeared beneath one of the larger boulders. His pulse picked up. "Water," he said quietly. The word felt strange in his mouth, out of place. Atlas's ears flicked. Daniel leaned closer, pressing his fingers into the line again. Cool. Damp. Not enough to drink. Not even close. But enough to mean something. Water didn't just appear in places like this. It came from somewhere. Daniel sat back slightly, mind working now despite the fatigue. "Underground," he murmured. "Seepage. Maybe a pocket. Or—" He stopped, looked at Atlas. The dog held his gaze. Steady. Certain. "You already knew," Daniel said. Atlas blinked once. That was answer enough. Daniel let out a slow breath, the edges of something new forming beneath the exhaustion. Hope. Small. Dangerous. But real. He glanced back the way they had been heading. Open canyon. Endless rock. No guarantees. Then back to the thin line of damp earth. A direction that made no sense. Except it did. In a place designed to kill slowly, anything that didn't fit the pattern mattered. Daniel pushed himself to his feet again. Pain flared. He ignored it. "We follow it," he said. Atlas was already moving. Slowly, carefully, the dog traced the faint line along the rockfall, nose low, body angled to keep it in sight. Daniel followed, each step deliberate. The line curved slightly, hugging the base of the canyon wall, weaving through the scattered debris. Sometimes it vanished entirely, only to reappear a few feet ahead, thinner, fainter. At one point, Daniel lost it. He stopped, scanning, frustration rising. Where? Atlas circled back immediately, returning to the last clear mark. He lowered his head, sniffed once, then stepped forward 2 paces and stopped. There. Daniel saw it again, fainter than before, but still there. "All right," Daniel said quietly. "You lead." They moved deeper. The canyon seemed to tighten further, the light dimming as the walls leaned closer together. Shadows pooled in the gaps between rocks, hiding depth and shape. The air changed, not cooler, but different. There was a faint movement to it now, barely noticeable. But there. Daniel paused, lifted his head slightly. "Feel that?" he asked. Atlas didn't look back, but his ears twitched. The line of damp soil led them straight toward the largest boulder in the rockfall, a massive slab that leaned against the canyon wall at an angle, its base buried in smaller stones and dust. And then it stopped. Just ended. Daniel stepped closer, scanning the area. Nothing. No opening. No visible crack. Just rock. Atlas moved to the base of the slab and pressed his nose against it. Then he stepped back, sat again, and waited. Daniel stared at the stone. "This is it?" he asked. Atlas didn't move, didn't doubt. Daniel stepped forward, placing his hand against the surface. The stone was warm, sun-heated, solid. He let his hand slide along it, then stopped. There. A difference. So slight, he almost missed it. A thin seam. Not natural. Or at least, not entirely. Daniel leaned closer, squinting. The edge of the boulder didn't sit flush against the wall behind it. There was a gap, narrow, irregular, half hidden by shadow and debris. He crouched again, ignoring the pain, and brushed away loose dirt and small stones. The gap widened, not by much, but enough to see into. Darkness. Deep. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. "This isn't just a rockfall," he said quietly. Atlas stood, stepped toward the gap, then stopped, looking back at Daniel. Waiting. Daniel exhaled slowly. They had been given a path, one that didn't lead out, but somewhere else. He looked up once more at the narrow strip of sky far above, then back at the darkness waiting beneath the stone. "All right," he said. Atlas moved first, slipping through the narrow opening with careful precision despite his injured paw. Daniel followed, turning sideways, forcing his body through the tight space, feeling the rock scrape against his shoulders, his ribs screaming in protest. For a moment, he thought he might get stuck. Then the pressure eased, and he stepped through. The light behind him dimmed. The air changed again, cooler now. And somewhere ahead, faint and steady, the sound of water. It echoed through the narrow passage like a promise Daniel Mercer didn't trust yet. The space beyond the rock fissure closed in immediately. The walls pressed tighter, forcing him to turn sideways again, shoulders scraping stone, boots finding uncertain ground beneath him. The light from the canyon behind them faded quickly, swallowed by the dark ahead. Atlas moved first, low, controlled. Even injured, the dog placed each step with precision, his body lowered, ears forward, senses stretched into the unseen. The faint sound of water seemed to pull him forward, guiding him with a certainty Daniel could feel, but not yet understand. Daniel followed, one hand trailing along the rock to keep his balance. The temperature dropped the deeper they went. Not cold, but cooler than the canyon, enough to raise the hair along his arms. He paused for a moment, breathing in. The air smelled different here. Stone, dampness, something old. "Underground," he murmured. Atlas flicked an ear but didn't stop. The passage sloped downward just enough to notice, not a steep descent, but deliberate, as if the earth itself had carved a path inward over years, or been carved. The sound of water grew clearer, not rushing, not flowing, dripping low, measured. Daniel swallowed. His throat tightened at the sound alone. They rounded a slight bend. And there it was. A thin thread of water traced along the rock floor, no wider than a shoelace. It caught what little light remained and reflected it in a dull shimmer. Daniel dropped to one knee without thinking. Pain flared through his ribs, but he ignored it. His hand reached out, fingers trembling slightly as they touched the stream. Cool. Real. He cupped his hand, lifting a small amount to his lips. The first drop hit his tongue like something electric. He closed his eyes as he drank, forcing himself to take it slow. Not too much, not too fast. The training was automatic. Dehydration didn't forgive mistakes. He took another careful sip, then another, each one easing the tight dryness in his throat just enough to remind him how close he had been to losing control. Atlas waited still, watching. Daniel lowered his hand and looked at him. "Good call," he said quietly. Atlas's tail moved once, small, but enough. Daniel leaned back slightly, letting the relief settle in. It wasn't much, but it was everything. They weren't done yet, not even close, but they weren't dying. Not today. Daniel pushed himself back to his feet, slower this time. "Let's see where it goes," he said. Atlas was already moving. They followed the thin stream deeper into the passage. The walls widened gradually, just enough to let Daniel straighten his posture. The ceiling rose overhead, the darkness opening up into something larger, more breathable. The dripping sound echoed differently now. Wider. Hollow. Daniel slowed. Something ahead. Atlas did the same. The dog's posture shifted. Alert, but not aggressive. Curious. Daniel stepped forward carefully, each movement deliberate. The passage opened. Not suddenly, but enough that the darkness in front of them felt expansive. Daniel stopped at the threshold. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he stepped in. The chamber revealed itself slowly, shapes emerging from shadow as his eyes adjusted. It wasn't natural. Not entirely. The walls were uneven, jagged in places, but the space itself had a form to it, a shape that suggested intention, purpose. The floor leveled out, scattered with debris that didn't belong. Wood, metal, fabric, old, very old. Daniel took another step, then another. Atlas moved past him slightly, circling the edge of the space, nose low, scanning. The air here was still, heavy with dust that hadn't been disturbed in years, maybe decades. Daniel's eyes adjusted further, and then he saw them, shapes in the darkness. Large, rectangular, stacked. His pulse picked up. "No way," he whispered. He moved closer. Boots scraping softly against stone. The first object came into full view. A chest, wooden, reinforced with rusted iron bands. Daniel crouched slowly, studying it. The metal was worn, flaking with age, but intact. The wood darkened with time, edges softened but still solid. Not recent, not abandoned yesterday. This had been here a long time. Atlas circled behind him, then stopped near the far wall. Daniel noticed, but didn't move yet. His attention stayed on the chest. He reached out, placing his hand on the lid. Dust coated his fingers instantly. He hesitated, then lifted. The hinges groaned softly, the sound loud in the stillness. The lid opened. Light, faint as it was, caught something inside. A dull gleam. Daniel leaned closer. Coins. Stacks of them. Gold old, untouched. For a moment he just stared. Not in awe. In calculation. "How long?" he murmured. Gold like this didn't end up in places like this by accident. He closed the lid slowly. His eyes moved across the chamber. More chests. Crates. Bundles wrapped in canvas, tied off and stacked against the wall. This wasn't a stash. It was a cache. Hidden. Deliberate. Forgotten. Atlas let out a low sound. Not a growl. A signal. Daniel turned. The dog stood near the far edge of the chamber, nose pressed toward something half buried in shadow. "Yeah, I see it," Daniel said. He stood and moved toward him. The object was smaller. Metal. Box-shaped. Unlike the chests, it was sealed tight, edges cleaner, less worn by time. Atlas tapped it lightly with his nose. Once, then stepped back. Daniel crouched again. "This is what you wanted me to find?" he asked. Atlas held his gaze. Daniel reached out, brushing dust away. The surface beneath was smoother, protected, important. His fingers found the latch. He paused. The air felt different suddenly. Heavier. Not with fear. With weight. Whatever this was, it mattered. Daniel exhaled slowly, then opened it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were documents. Thick. Carefully stored. Preserved. Daniel lifted one bundle out, unwrapping it slowly. Pages. Handwritten. Columns of numbers. Names. Dates. Maps sketched in faded ink. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His brow furrowed. "This isn't," he started, then stopped. It wasn't random. It wasn't scattered. It was organized. Meticulous. A record. Of something. Daniel flipped another page, and another. The pieces began to align. Shipments, routes, transactions, and alongside them names, familiar ones, too familiar. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't just a hideout," he said quietly. Atlas stood beside him now, silent. Watching. Daniel looked back at the chests, the gold, then down at the pages in his hands. "This is evidence." The word echoed softly in the chamber, and suddenly, the canyon above them didn't feel like the only trap. Because whatever had been hidden here had been meant to stay buried. And now it wasn't. The silence in the chamber felt different after that. Before, it had been the quiet of something forgotten. Now, it was the quiet of something exposed. Daniel Mercer remained crouched over the open metal case, the pages spread carefully across the flat stone beside him. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, turning each sheet with the same precision he had once used handling classified documents in a different life. Atlas stayed close, not restless, not uneasy, just present. The dog shifted his weight slightly, lowering himself onto the cool stone floor, but his eyes never left Daniel. Every few seconds his ears flicked, listening to the cavern, the passage behind them, the world beyond the rock. Daniel read. At first, the entries looked like nothing more than numbers and names. But patterns emerged. Dates lined up with routes. Routes connected to shipments. And the shipments, they weren't small. Large quantities. Repeated movements. Always through the same areas. Always disappearing after. "This wasn't random," Daniel said quietly. He flipped another page. A rough map stared back at him. Hand-drawn. Detailed. The canyon was there, marked with a crude symbol, a circle with a slash through it. Lines extended outward, connecting to locations Daniel recognized from the drive into town. Briar's End. The surrounding ranchlands. Old trade paths. He leaned back slightly, processing. "Smuggling routes," he murmured. "Or supply lines." Atlas shifted, lifting his head. Daniel continued. More pages. More names. Some unfamiliar, some not. He froze. His eyes narrowed. No, he said under his breath. He flipped back, checked again. The name was still there. Boone, not Clifford. Older. The handwriting placed it decades earlier. Daniel's jaw tightened. Family business, he said. Atlas watched him. Daniel's breathing slowed, steady but heavier now. He turned another page, and another. The picture became clearer. An organized network. Outlaws, by the look of it, but not the kind that worked alone. This was structured, coordinated. Someone had been keeping records. Detailed ones. Every transaction accounted for. Every movement logged. Daniel picked up another bundle, unwrapping it carefully. Letters. Folded. Some sealed. Others already opened. He chose one at random. The paper crackled softly as he unfolded it. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still readable. He scanned the first lines, then stopped. Read them again. His expression shifted. This isn't just a record, he said quietly. He looked at Atlas. It's a confession. The letter spoke of betrayal, of a planned exchange, a deal that had gone wrong, or had never been meant to go right in the first place. Names appeared again. Familiar ones. Town officials. Landowners. Men who had likely never set foot in this canyon, yet whose presence was written into every page. Daniel's mind worked through it quickly. They weren't just running goods, he said. They were being used. Atlas's ears twitched. Daniel stood slowly, ignoring the protest in his ribs. He walked the length of the chamber now, scanning everything with a sharper eye. The crates, the chests, the bundles. All of it placed with purpose. Hidden. Preserved. This was never meant to be found, he said. He stopped near the center of the chamber, turning slowly, which means someone made sure it stayed hidden. Atlas rose as well, moving to his side. Daniel looked back down at the documents, then toward the narrow passage they had come through. A thought settled in. Cold. Precise. They knew about this place, he said. Atlas's body stiffened slightly. Daniel's gaze hardened. Or at least someone did. He crouched again, gathering the documents carefully, stacking them in the order he had found them. His movements were controlled, but urgency crept into them now. This isn't just old history, he continued. This is leverage. Evidence. He paused, then added quietly, motive. Atlas let out a low sound. Daniel looked up. What? He asked. The dog turned his head toward the passage. Not aggressive. Alert. Listening. Daniel held still. The silence pressed in again. But now it felt thinner. Fragile. As if something could break it at any moment. He listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the faint, steady drip of water echoing through the cavern. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Stay sharp," he said. Atlas didn't need the reminder. Daniel turned back to the metal case, placing the documents inside again, wrapping them carefully in the oilcloth. He hesitated for a moment before closing the lid. His eyes moved once more across the chamber. The gold, the crates, the years of silence that had protected it all. Then he shut the case. The latch clicked softly, a small sound, but final. He picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, not just in weight, in consequence. Daniel straightened, adjusting his grip. "We don't leave this behind," he said. Atlas stepped closer. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah, I know." He took a step toward the passage, then stopped. Something tugged at the back of his mind. A detail. Unfinished. He turned back. His eyes scanned the chamber again. Slower this time, more deliberate. There, near the far wall, partially hidden behind a collapsed crate, another object. Smaller. Paper. Daniel walked over, setting the metal case down carefully. He crouched, pulling the debris aside. A folded sheet lay beneath it, newer than the others, not aged the same way. His pulse picked up. He opened it. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. His breath caught. "No," he whispered. The name at the bottom confirmed it. Evan Mercer. Daniel's grip tightened on the paper. The words blurred for a second as something hit him, harder than the fall, sharper than the pain in his ribs. Atlas moved instantly, pressing against him again. Daniel swallowed, forced himself to read. The note was short, rushed, but clear. He read it once, then again, each word cutting deeper. "They knew," Daniel said quietly. His voice had changed, flattened, controlled, but beneath it, something else. Rising. They knew what he found. Atlas stayed close. Daniel folded the paper slowly, more carefully than anything else he had touched in the chamber. He slipped it into his jacket close, safe. Then he picked up the metal case again. His movements were different now. Sharper. Focused. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about getting out. This was about something that had started long before he arrived, and something that had taken his brother. Daniel looked once more at the chamber, then toward the passage leading out. "We're not done here," he said. Atlas stood ready. The silence followed them as they moved back toward the narrow opening. But now, it felt like it was watching them go. Daniel Mercer didn't rush. He moved with control, even as something inside him pushed hard against it. Anger, sharp and rising, fueled by the words he had just read, and the name still echoing in his head. Evan. Atlas slipped through the narrow fissure first, pausing just beyond it, turning back as always to make sure Daniel followed. Daniel turned sideways, forcing his body through the tight gap again. The rock scraped his ribs, sending a flare of pain through his side, but he didn't slow. Not this time. He stepped back into the canyon. The heat hit him immediately, heavy and dry, wrapping around him like a reminder of where they still were, alive. but not safe. Atlas moved a few paces ahead, scanning the open space, his posture alert again, shifting from exploration to defense. Daniel set the metal case down carefully near the base of the rockfall, then leaned against the canyon wall for a moment, catching his breath. The sky above was still a thin strip, unchanged. The canyon hadn't moved, but everything else had. Daniel slid down to a crouch and opened the case again. He needed to be sure, needed to see it clearly in the light, even if the light here was barely enough to work with. Atlas settled beside him, body angled outward, watching the canyon while Daniel focused on the documents. Page by page, he went through them again. Faster this time. More deliberate. He wasn't looking for patterns anymore. He was looking for confirmation. Names. He found them. One after another, some older, long gone, buried in the history of the town. But others, still there, still active. Daniel's jaw tightened as he read. The sheriff, he murmured. Council members. His finger stopped on another name. Boone. Again. Different entries. Different years. But always connected. Always present. This didn't stop, Daniel said quietly. It changed. Atlas's ears flicked. Daniel turned another page. The ledger entries grew more recent the deeper he went. The handwriting shifted. Different authors, different times. But the structure remained. Transactions, movements, cover-ups. The system hadn't ended. It had evolved. He reached for one of the letters again. This one was older, the ink faded, the paper brittle. He read it slowly. A deal, a promise, protection in exchange for silence. The tone shifted halfway through, uneasy, uncertain, then ended abruptly. Daniel lowered the letter. They were cut off, he said, left exposed. Atlas shifted slightly, sensing the change in Daniel's voice. Daniel's mind worked through it. Outlaws had used the canyon as a base. That much was clear. But they hadn't been working alone. They had partners, people in town, people with influence. And at some point, they had been betrayed. Daniel flipped to the last pages of the ledger. The final entries were chaotic, incomplete. Names scratched out, numbers left unfinished. Something had gone wrong. Badly. He found another note tucked between the pages. Short. Sharp. Written in a different hand. It described an ambush, a meeting that had turned into a trap. A group wiped out. No survivors listed. Daniel's eyes narrowed. They cleaned house, he said. Atlas turned his head toward him. Daniel nodded once, more to himself than to the dog. They took the gold, he continued, took the roots, took everything. His gaze drifted back toward the cave. Except what was hidden. The realization settled in deeper. This chamber, this wasn't just a stash. It was a mistake. Or maybe insurance. Something someone had kept back. Something that never got recovered. Daniel exhaled slowly. And that's what Evan found. The name came out quieter this time. He reached into his jacket, pulling out the folded note again. His brother's handwriting. No doubt about it. He read it once more, each word steady, focused. Evan had known what he was dealing with, had known the risk, and had come here anyway. Daniel's grip tightened. "You didn't get lost," he said softly. "You got too close." Atlas shifted closer, pressing lightly against his side. Daniel rested his hand on the dog's neck, grounding himself. For a moment, the canyon faded. The pain, the heat, all of it pushed back by something heavier. Memory. Guilt. He saw it again, the last time he had spoken to Evan. A short call. Rushed. His brother's voice carrying something he hadn't paid enough attention to. "I think I found something, Dan," Evan had said. "Something big." Daniel had told him to be careful, had told him to wait. He hadn't told him to stop, hadn't told him to walk away. The memory snapped shut. Daniel opened his eyes. His breathing had changed again. Faster, tighter. Atlas pressed in harder this time, firm and steady. Daniel nodded slightly, forcing control back. In through the nose, he murmured, "Hold, out again." The rhythm steadied him, brought him back. When he opened his eyes again, the anger was still there, but now it was sharper, focused, not wild. "They didn't just take him," Daniel said quietly. "They erased him." Atlas's ears flicked. Daniel looked up toward the canyon rim. "They tried to erase me too." The statement hung in the air. Simple. True. Daniel closed the metal case, securing the latch with a firm click. The sound echoed faintly off the canyon walls. Final. He stood, slower this time, but steadier. The pain was still there. The canyon was still a trap. But the situation had changed. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a problem to solve. An enemy to identify, and a truth to carry out of here. Daniel adjusted his grip on the case. "We don't just get out," he said. Atlas stood immediately. "We take this with us." The dog moved into position beside him. Daniel took a step away from the rockfall, then stopped. His eyes moved across the canyon again. Scanning. Thinking. The way they had come wasn't an option. Not directly. Too exposed. Too predictable. If Boone had sent men to finish the job, they wouldn't wait long. Daniel looked back at the fissure, then at the thin line of damp earth, then up at the canyon walls. "Water flows out," he said quietly. Atlas's ears lifted. Daniel nodded once, which means there's another path. Hope again. But different this time. Not fragile. Calculated. He stepped forward, following the faint trail once more. Atlas moved ahead, picking up the line without hesitation. The canyon stretched out in front of them, still dangerous, still silent, but no longer unknowable. Daniel's pace steadied. Each step carried purpose now. Behind him, the hidden chamber remained, its secrets uncovered, its silence broken. Ahead, the canyon waited. But this time, it wasn't the only thing that did. Daniel Mercer moved with purpose now, each step sharper, more controlled than before. The canyon hadn't changed, but he had. The pain was still there, the heat still pressing down, but the uncertainty, the drifting, was gone. Atlas stayed ahead, following the faint trace of moisture as it curved along the canyon floor. Daniel's mind worked as he walked. Not scattered anymore. Focused. The documents in the metal case weren't just evidence. They were a map. A story. And at the center of it, Evan. Daniel slowed. His hand slipped into his jacket again, pulling out the folded note his brother had left behind. He didn't need to read it again, but he did. The handwriting was steady. No panic, no fear, just urgency. I found it, Evan had written. The canyon isn't empty. It never was. Daniel's jaw tightened. Atlas glanced back briefly, sensing the shift. Daniel folded the note carefully and put it away. He knew, Daniel said quietly. He knew what he was walking into. They continued forward. The canyon widened slightly here, the walls pulling back just enough to let more light spill down. It should have felt like relief. It didn't. Daniel's instincts tightened instead. Open space meant exposure. Atlas slowed too, his head lifted, ears forward, body going still for a fraction of a second before moving again, more cautious now. Daniel noticed. You feel it too, he said. Atlas didn't respond, but he didn't need to. Daniel scanned the canyon walls, the ridges above, the broken ledges that could hide movement. Nothing. But that didn't mean much. He had learned that the hard way. They moved another 50 yards before Daniel stopped again. Not because of pain, because something didn't fit. The ground here was disturbed, subtle, but recent. Boot marks. Not his. Not Evan's. Fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened. Daniel crouched slowly, examining them. 2 sets, maybe 3, coming from the direction of the canyon entrance, heading deeper in. Toward them. Atlas let out a low, quiet growl. Daniel nodded. Yeah, he said. We're not alone anymore. The realization settled in cold. Boone hadn't just thrown him in here and walked away. He had sent someone back. To check. To finish it. Daniel stood, adjusting his grip on the metal case. Then we don't wait, he said. Atlas moved closer, staying tight at his side now. The pace picked up. Not reckless, but faster, deliberate. Daniel followed the water trail as it narrowed again, slipping between tighter rock formations, weaving through sections where the canyon floor dipped and rose unpredictably. His breathing grew heavier, not from panic, from strain, but he pushed through it. Ahead, the canyon curved sharply. Atlas stopped just before the bend, completely still. Daniel froze behind him. The dog's posture changed instantly. Rigid, focused, listening. Daniel lowered himself slightly, shifting his weight to reduce noise. "What is it?" he whispered. Atlas didn't move. Then, a sound. Faint, but unmistakable. Boots on rock. somewhere beyond the bend. Daniel's grip tightened on the case. His pulse slowed, training taking over. He set the case down silently, easing it against the canyon wall. Then he moved forward, step by step, keeping low, keeping close to the rock. Atlas stayed behind him this time, watching, ready. Daniel reached the edge of the bend and stopped. He leaned slightly, just enough to see. A man stood about 30 yards ahead, tall, lean, moving slowly, scanning the ground, a rifle slung across his back. Hat pulled low. Tracking. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "This one's careful," he murmured. The man crouched briefly, touching the ground, following the same trail, the same path Daniel had taken. Then he stood and looked up, not directly at Daniel, but close enough, too close. Daniel pulled back immediately, pressing flat against the rock. Atlas moved silently to his side. "Tracker," Daniel whispered. Atlas's body tensed. Daniel exhaled slowly. Options. He ran through them fast. Run. No. Too exposed. Too slow. Hide? Maybe. But not for long. Fight? Only if forced. He glanced at Atlas. The dog held his gaze, waiting. Daniel nodded once. "Stay quiet," he said. Atlas didn't need the instruction. Daniel picked up a small stone and tossed it lightly down the opposite side of the canyon. It landed with a faint clatter. The sound echoed just enough. The tracker's head snapped toward it. He moved immediately, stepping away from Daniel's position, following the noise. Daniel didn't waste the moment. "Move," he whispered. They slipped around the bend in the opposite direction, staying low, keeping to the shadows where the canyon allowed it. The trail of moisture continued, fainter now, but still there. Daniel followed it, trusting Atlas to keep them on it. Behind them, the sound of movement returned. Faster this time. The tracker had realized. "Not good," Daniel muttered. Atlas's pace increased despite his injury. Determined, relentless. The canyon tightened again, the walls closing in, forcing them into a narrower path. No room to maneuver, no cover. Just forward. Daniel's breathing grew harsher. His ribs burned with every step, but he didn't slow. Not now. Ahead, the trail dipped suddenly. The ground sloped downward into a narrow chute between two jagged rock faces. Atlas went first, sliding slightly before catching his footing. Daniel followed, using his hands to steady himself. They emerged into a lower section of the canyon. Darker. Cooler. The sound of water stronger here. But there was something else now. Another sound. Closer. Behind them. The tracker had followed. Fast. Daniel turned, scanning the upper edge they had just come down from. A shadow moved. Then a figure appeared at the top of the chute. The man looked down. Their eyes met. For a split second, neither moved. Then the tracker smiled. Not wide, not loud, just enough. Recognition. Daniel's stomach tightened. "He found us," he said. Atlas stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Daniel. Protective, Ready. The tracker began his descent. Careful, controlled, confident. Daniel's mind raced. No room to run, no time to hide. This wasn't avoidance anymore. This was contact. He set the metal case down behind him. Slowly, deliberately, then straightened. Pain flared, ignored. His stance shifted. Balanced. Ready. Atlas lowered his body, muscles coiled. The tracker reached the bottom, 10 yards away. He unslung the rifle but didn't raise it. Not yet. Boone was right, the man said, voice calm. You're harder to kill than you look. Daniel didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on the man. You should have stayed down, the tracker continued. Daniel's voice came back low. Steady. Not my habit. The tracker nodded slightly. Yeah, he said. I figured. A beat. The canyon held its breath. Then everything moved at once. The tracker's rifle began to rise. Daniel Mercer didn't wait to see it level. He moved first. A hard step forward, closing distance before the man could settle his aim. Pain tore through Daniel's ribs as he lunged, but momentum carried him through it. His shoulder slammed into the tracker's chest, knocking the barrel offline. The rifle fired. The sound cracked through the canyon, deafening in the narrow space. The shot went wide, ricocheting somewhere above, sending loose stones skittering down. Atlas exploded into motion. A blur of muscle and precision, he hit the tracker from the side, jaws clamping onto the man's forearm before the rifle could be brought back around. The man grunted, twisting, trying to shake him off. Daniel followed through, driving the tracker backward into the rock wall. The impact knocked the air from the man's lungs, but he recovered fast, faster than most. Get off, the tracker snarled, swinging his free arm. Atlas held on, teeth locked. Body anchored despite the injury in his paw. Daniel reached for the rifle, wrenching it free just as the tracker drove a knee into his side. Pain exploded again, white hot, forcing a grunt from Daniel's throat. He staggered. The tracker used the opening. He twisted hard, slamming his elbow into Atlas's side. The dog released with a sharp bark, stumbling back a step. That was all the tracker needed. He lunged forward, grabbing Daniel by the jacket and driving him down to the ground. The world hit hard. Dust filled the air. Daniel's back slammed against the stone. Breath knocked loose again. The tracker came down with him, one hand gripping Daniel's throat, the other reaching for the knife at his belt. Close quarters. Too close. Daniel's vision narrowed. Not panic. Focus. He shifted his weight, turning slightly, just enough to break the direct pressure. His hand came up, catching the tracker's wrist before the blade cleared the sheath. The two locked in place. Straining. Neither giving. The tracker leaned in, eyes cold, breath steady. Should have stayed dead, he said. Daniel's grip tightened. Not today, he replied. The knife came free halfway. Daniel drove his knee up, catching the man in the side. It wasn't clean, not strong enough to drop him, but enough to shift the balance. Enough. Atlas hit again, this time from behind. He didn't go for the arm. He went for the shoulder. Teeth sank in, pulling hard, dragging the tracker off-center. The knife slipped from the man's hand, clattering against the stone. Daniel rolled, breaking free from the chokehold, sucking in a sharp breath as air returned. He scrambled to his feet. The tracker turned, trying to face both threats at once. Mistake. Daniel stepped in, fast, driving his fist into the man's jaw. The impact snapped the tracker's head to the side. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Tough. Too tough. He came back with a swing of his own, catching Daniel across the cheek. The blow landed solid, sending him off balance. Daniel tasted blood. Didn't stop. He stepped in again, closing distance, eliminating space for the man to use his strength. Elbow to ribs, shoulder into chest, controlled, efficient strikes. Atlas circled, looking for an opening. The tracker tried to create distance, but the canyon walls boxed him in. No room to maneuver, no space to reset. Daniel drove forward again. Another strike. Another. The tracker faltered. Just for a second. Enough. Atlas lunged low, taking the man's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard. Daniel followed, dropping on top of him, pinning him with his weight despite the pain screaming through his body. The tracker struggled, twisting, trying to break free. Daniel grabbed his arm, wrenching it behind his back. The man grunted. "Don't," Daniel said, voice low. The struggle slowed, not stopped, but controlled. Atlas stood over them now, teeth bared, a low growl vibrating through his chest. The tracker went still, not out of fear, out of calculation. Daniel held him there for a moment longer, making sure. Then reached for the man's belt, pulling free a length of cord. He worked quickly, binding the tracker's wrists behind his back, tight enough to hold. When it was done, Daniel pushed himself up, stepping back. The tracker rolled onto his side, breathing hard, eyes locked on Daniel. "Boone's not going to stop," he said. Daniel wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "Didn't expect him to," he replied. Atlas stepped closer, standing between them, protective and unyielding. The tracker's gaze shifted briefly to the dog. "Should have finished it when we had the chance," he muttered. Daniel crouched down, just enough to meet his eyes. "You tried," he said. A beat of silence stretched between them. Then Daniel stood again, turning away. He walked back to the metal case, picking it up and checking the latch. Still secure. Still intact. He exhaled slowly. Atlas followed, staying close. Daniel glanced back at the tracker. "Name," he said. The man hesitated. Then, after a moment, "Royce." "Royce what?" "Kellen." Daniel nodded once. "All right, Royce," he said. "You're coming with us." Royce let out a dry laugh. "Not much choice, is there?" "No," Daniel said. "Not anymore." He adjusted his grip on the case, then looked ahead. The canyon stretched out in front of them. Still dangerous. Still unknown. But now, they had more than survival. They had proof. And a witness. Daniel took a step forward. Atlas moved with him. Royce shifted behind them, bound but not broken. The dynamic had changed. The canyon was no longer just a trap. It was a path. And for the first time since the fall, Daniel wasn't just reacting. He was moving towards something. The canyon no longer felt like a place of endings. It felt like a line, and he had already crossed it. They moved in a tight formation now, Daniel in front, Atlas slightly ahead and to the side, Royce Kellen behind them, wrists bound but walking under his own power. The balance had shifted, but not enough to be comfortable. Daniel kept his pace steady, measured against the pain in his ribs and the fatigue creeping into his legs. Every step cost something now, but stopping would cost more. Atlas limped, but never slowed. The dog's injury had worsened after the fight, blood darkening the fur around his paw, but his focus hadn't changed. His ears flicked constantly, scanning the canyon ahead, then behind, always aware of the man following them. Royce said nothing for a long time, just walked. Watched. Calculated. Daniel could feel it without turning around. "Talk," Daniel said finally, voice low. Royce didn't respond. Daniel didn't slow. "You came in alone?" he asked. A beat passed. Then no. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "How many?" "Enough." Not helpful. Daniel glanced at Atlas. The dog's posture hadn't changed. Still alert, still listening. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Boone sent you to confirm," he said, "or to clean up." Royce let out a quiet breath. "Both," he admitted. Daniel nodded once. "That tracks." They moved through another narrowing section of the canyon, stepping carefully over loose rock and uneven ground. The thin trace of moisture they had been following earlier had grown faint again, almost invisible. But Daniel knew it was still there. He could feel the slope beneath his boots, the subtle pull downward. Water had to go somewhere. "Where does this lead?" Daniel asked. Royce didn't answer right away. Daniel stopped. Turned. The look he gave him wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Royce met his eyes, then looked away out. He said finally. Daniel studied him. "Out where?" Royce hesitated again. "Then, other side of the ridge. There's a cut through, old drainage line. Most people don't know it's there." Daniel held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. "Good," he said. "That's where we're going." They moved again. Faster now. Purpose tightening every step. The canyon began to shift around them, walls angling differently, the ground dipping more noticeably. Shadows stretched longer as the light above narrowed again. Atlas paused suddenly. Daniel stopped instantly. The dog's head lifted, ears forward, body rigid. Daniel felt it too. A change in the air. A sound. Faint. But there. More than one set of footsteps this time. Behind them, closer than before. Royce exhaled slowly. "They're fast," he said. Daniel didn't look back. "How many?" he asked again. Royce shook his head. "Don't know. But if they picked up the trail, they won't stop." Daniel nodded once. "Then we don't give them time." He adjusted his grip on the metal case and started forward again, pace increasing despite the strain it put on his body. Atlas moved with him instantly. Royce followed, no longer dragging his feet. The canyon floor dipped sharply ahead, opening into a wider basin-like section filled with scattered boulders and broken rock. No cover. Too open. Daniel's instincts tightened. "Move through it," he said. "Don't stop." They crossed quickly, boots scraping, stone shifting underfoot. Atlas stayed close now, no longer ranging ahead. Halfway through the basin, the first shot rang out. Sharp, cracking through the air. A bullet struck rock near Daniel's feet, sending shards outward. "Down!" Daniel barked. They dropped instantly. Daniel pulled Royce down with him, forcing him behind a boulder as Atlas flattened low to the ground beside them. Another shot, closer, more precise. Daniel pressed his back against the stone, breathing controlled. "They've got eyes on us," he said. Royce nodded slightly. "High ground," he added. Daniel leaned just enough to glance up. Two figures on the ridge above, maybe more behind them, too far to engage effectively, too exposed to stay. "Move left," Daniel said. "Use the rocks." He didn't wait for agreement. He moved. Fast. Low. From one piece of cover to the next. Atlas followed seamlessly, matching his movement despite the injury. Royce struggled to keep up, bound hands limiting his balance. Another shot, closer. Stone exploded inches from Daniel's shoulder. He didn't stop. They reached the far side of the basin, slipping into a narrower cut where the canyon walls rose again, offering better cover. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Daniel pressed himself against the rock, listening. Silence again. But not the same silence as before. This one was active. Waiting. "They'll come down," Royce said quietly. Daniel nodded. He replied. He looked ahead. The canyon continued to slope downward, the path narrowing again. If Royce was right, there was a way out. But it wasn't guaranteed. And now, they were being pushed toward it. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This is it," he said. Royce looked at him. Daniel met his gaze. "No more turning back," he added. Royce gave a faint, humorless smile. Wasn't an option anyway. Daniel nodded. He looked down at Atlas. The dog looked back. Steady, unshaken, despite the blood on his paw, despite the chase behind them. Daniel reached down, resting a hand briefly on his neck. "Almost there," he said quietly. Atlas's tail moved once. Daniel straightened. Pain flared again. Ignored. He tightened his grip on the case, then stepped forward, into whatever came next. The canyon tightened around them as if it had been waiting. The walls rose higher, leaning inward just enough to dim the sky above into a thin, gray-blue ribbon. The air cooled slightly, but not enough to ease the weight pressing on Daniel Mercer's chest. Behind them, somewhere above and out of sight, the men were still moving. Not rushing. Hunting. Daniel kept his pace steady. Too fast and he would burn out. Too slow and they would close the distance. Atlas moved beside him now, no longer ranging ahead. The dog's limp had worsened, but he compensated instinctively, shifting his weight, adjusting each step without hesitation. Daniel noticed everything. The uneven gait, the shallow breath, the way Atlas still refused to fall behind. "You don't quit, do you?" Daniel muttered. Atlas flicked an ear but didn't break stride. Royce followed a few steps behind, quieter now, less defiant. The chase had changed something in him. The confidence had faded, replaced by something closer to understanding. "They won't stop," Royce said finally. Daniel didn't look back. "I know." "They've got radios," Royce added. "They'll spread out, cut us off if they can." Daniel nodded slightly. "Then we don't give them the chance." The path sloped downward again. More sharply this time. The ground underfoot shifted from dry dust to packed earth, darker, firmer. The faint trace of moisture they had been following returned, stronger now, easier to see. Atlas's pace picked up, despite the injury, despite the exhaustion. The dog knew Daniel felt it too. "We're close," he said. The canyon curved ahead, bending out of sight. The sound of water grew louder. Not just a drip now, but a steady trickle somewhere below. Hope. Real this time, but it came with pressure. Because the closer they got, the tighter the trap could become. Daniel rounded the bend and stopped. The path dropped into a narrow chute carved by years of water flow. The walls on either side were slick, worn smooth, angling downward into shadow. At the bottom, a thin stream, small, but moving, flowing away from the canyon. Daniel's eyes tracked it. "This is it," he said. Royce stepped closer, peering down. "Drainage line," he confirmed, "follows the ridge out the other side." Daniel exhaled. Not relief. Not yet. Just confirmation. Atlas stepped forward without hesitation, beginning the descent carefully, testing each step. Daniel followed, sliding part of the way, using his hands to control the drop. Pain flared again in his ribs, sharp and immediate, but he forced through it. Royce came last, slower with bound hands but managing. They reached the bottom. The air felt different here, moving, alive. Daniel crouched, touching the stream. Cool, clean. He brought water to his lips again, careful, measured. Atlas drank beside him, slower than before, conserving energy. Royce waited his turn. Daniel watched him for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead." Royce knelt, drinking quickly, then wiping his mouth with his shoulder. "Didn't think I'd see this side of it," he said. Daniel didn't respond. He stood, scanning ahead. The stream cut through a narrow passage between the rocks, winding out of sight. "This leads out," he said. Royce nodded. "Yeah, but it's tight in places. Not easy to move fast." Daniel adjusted his grip on the metal case. "We don't need fast," he said. "We need quiet." Atlas moved forward again, following the stream. Daniel took one last look behind them. The canyon they had come through stretched back in shadow, silent again, but no longer empty. "They'll follow," Royce said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah," he replied, "but not as fast." He stepped into the narrow passage. The walls closed in again, forcing them into single file. The stream wound between their boots, the sound of water masking their movement just enough. The light shifted as they moved, brighter in places where the rock opened slightly, darker where it pressed tight. Time blurred. Step after step. Breath after breath. Daniel's body began to feel heavier, fatigue settling deeper now, the adrenaline from the fight fading, pain returning in waves. He stumbled once, caught himself. Atlas stopped immediately, turning back, pressing against his leg. "I'm good," Daniel said quietly. Atlas didn't move, didn't believe it. Daniel let out a slow breath. In through the nose, he murmured, "Hold. Out." The rhythm steadied him again. He straightened. "Let's keep moving." Atlas turned forward. They continued. The passage widened gradually, the walls pulling back, the light growing stronger. Ahead, a faint glow appeared, natural light, filtering in from an opening. Daniel's pace increased slightly. Royce noticed. "That's the exit," he said. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. They reached the final stretch. The stream spilled out between two large rocks, opening into a wider basin on the other side of the ridge. Grass. Sparse but real. Wind, cooler, moving. Daniel stepped out first. The change hit him immediately. Open sky, full, unbroken. For a moment he just stood there, breathing it in. Atlas emerged beside him, lifting his head, ears scanning the open terrain. Royce followed, blinking against the light. They had made it out, but Daniel didn't relax. Not yet. He turned, scanning the ridge behind them. "They'll come through there," he said. Royce nodded. "Yeah." Daniel looked ahead. The land stretched out in rolling hills, broken by patches of trees and distant rock formations. Somewhere out there, help. Authority. A chance to end this. He tightened his grip on the case. "We keep moving," he said. Atlas stepped forward. Despite the injury, despite everything. Daniel followed. Because getting out of the canyon was just the beginning. The open land beyond the ridge felt unreal after the suffocating walls of Red Scar Gorge. Wind moved freely here, bending the tall grass in slow waves. The sky stretched wide and endless, pale blue fading toward gold at the horizon. It should have felt like freedom. It didn't. Not yet. Daniel Mercer kept moving. His pace was slower now, not from hesitation but from exhaustion finally catching up to him. Every step pulled at his ribs, every breath reminding him of the fall, the fight, the climb back out of something that had been meant to bury him. Atlas stayed close. Closer than before. The dog's limp had worsened, his paw leaving faint marks in the dirt behind them. But his head remained high, scanning the land, tracking every movement of wind and shadow. Royce followed a few steps back. Quieter now. Changed. The ridge behind them stood silent. For now. Daniel didn't look back again. "They'll spread out," Royce said. "Try to cut us off before we reach town." Daniel nodded. "Then we don't go back to town." Royce frowned slightly. Where else is there? Daniel adjusted his grip on the metal case. Federal, he said. Nearest marshal office. Royce's expression shifted. You're serious? Daniel glanced at him briefly. Yeah. Royce let out a breath, something close to disbelief. That'll bring everything down, he said. Boone, the council, all of it. Daniel didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed forward. That's the point, he said finally. They moved across the open ground, angling away from Briar's End, cutting through terrain that offered little cover but fewer predictable paths. The land rose and fell in long, shallow slopes, broken occasionally by clusters of trees and low rock formations. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched longer. Daniel's steps grew heavier. His vision blurred at the edges once, then again. Atlas noticed. He slowed, pressing lightly against Daniel's leg. I'm fine, Daniel said. Atlas didn't believe him. Daniel exhaled slowly. In through the nose, he murmured, Hold out again. The rhythm steadied him, but only just. Royce stepped closer. You need to rest, he said. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. You collapse out here. It won't matter what you're carrying. Daniel stopped, turned. For a moment, the silence between them stretched tight. Then Daniel nodded once. 5 minutes, he said. They moved to a cluster of rocks offering minimal shade. Daniel lowered himself carefully, setting the metal case beside him. Atlas lay down immediately, favoring his injured paw. Royce sank down across from them, catching his breath. No one spoke. The wind moved through the grass. Distant, steady. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Not sleep, just stillness. But it didn't last. A sound broke through it. Faint, far off. Engines. Daniel's eyes snapped open. Atlas was already on his feet. Ears forward, body tense. Royce turned, scanning the horizon. Vehicles, he said. Daniel stood slowly, pushing through the pain. Which direction? Royce pointed. East. 2, maybe 3. Daniel followed his gaze. Dust plumes in the distance, moving fast toward them. They found another route, Royce said. Daniel nodded. Or they called it in. Either way, time was gone. Move, Daniel said. They didn't wait. They pushed forward again, angling toward a line of trees in the distance. The engines grew louder, closing. Atlas ran now, despite the limp, despite the strain. Daniel kept pace as best he could, forcing his body to hold together just a little longer. The trees drew closer. A narrow dirt road cut through them. Empty. For now. Daniel reached it first, scanning both directions. No vehicles yet. Follow it, he said. Royce nodded. They turned south, moving along the road at a steady pace. Minutes passed. Then, a different sound, closer, from ahead. Daniel slowed. Atlas stopped. A vehicle appeared through the trees. Dark green. Government markings faint but visible. Daniel's chest tightened. Marshal, he said. The truck slowed as it approached, then stopped a few yards away. A man stepped out. Tall, gray at the temples, eyes sharp. Assessing. He took in the scene quickly. Daniel's condition, Atlas's injury, Royce's bound hands, the case. "What happened?" he asked. Daniel stepped forward, held out the case. "Evidence," he said, "and a witness." The marshal's gaze sharpened. "Against who?" Daniel met his eyes. "Clifford Boone," he said, "and half the town of Briar's End." A beat of silence. Then the marshal nodded once. "Get in," he said. The ride back felt different. Not relief, not yet, just movement towards something bigger. At the marshal's office, everything unfolded quickly. Documents examined, statements taken. Royce separated, questioned. At first, he resisted, held the line. But the evidence was too much. The ledgers, the names, the patterns. It all aligned. And when the pressure came, he broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to confirm everything. Orders were given, calls made, vehicles prepared. By nightfall, a convoy moved toward Briar's End. Daniel stood outside the office, Atlas resting beside him, watching the headlights disappear into the dark. Hours passed. Then word came back. Arrests, multiple. Boone taken without resistance. Sheriff included, others. Names Daniel had seen in the ledger. The town exposed. Daniel leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. It was over. The part that had started in the canyon. The part that had taken Evan. Atlas shifted beside him. Daniel looked down. The dog met his gaze. Steady, unshaken. Daniel reached down, resting a hand on his neck. "We're not done," he said quietly. But for the first time, the weight felt lighter. Morning came slow over the Wyoming hills. Light rolled across the land in long, soft bands, touching the ridges first, then the open grass, then finally the small rise where Daniel Mercer stood. The air was different now. Cooler. Cleaner. No dust from engines. No tension hanging just beneath the surface. Just wind. And space and quiet that didn't feel like it was waiting for something to break it. Atlas stood beside him. The dog's paw was wrapped now, clean bandage secured tight, the result of careful hands and time given without urgency. He shifted his weight slightly, testing it, but the stiffness was fading. Daniel noticed. "You're healing," he said. Atlas glanced up briefly. Not proud, not relieved, just present. Always present. Daniel looked out over the land, the same land Boone had dismissed, the same land Evan had died for, the same land that had nearly taken him. It didn't look different, but it felt different. Because now, he understood what it held. Behind him, the sound of boots on dirt approached. Daniel didn't turn right away. He knew who it was. Marshal Carter stepped up beside him, hands resting loosely on his belt. "Figured I'd find you out here," Carter said. Daniel nodded slightly. Didn't feel right staying inside, he replied. Carter looked out over the land. Funny thing about places like this, he said. People either see nothing or they see everything. Daniel let that sit for a moment, then asked, "How bad is it?" Carter exhaled. "Worse than we thought," he said. Boone wasn't just running land deals. He was protecting a system that's been in place for decades. Money, influence, control, all tied back to those records you brought in. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "And the town?" he asked. "Shaken," Carter said. "Some didn't know. Some didn't want to know. Either way, it's coming apart." Daniel nodded once. That was expected. Truth didn't fix things. It broke them first. Carter glanced at him. "You did more than expose a few men," he added. "You changed the foundation of that place." Daniel didn't respond, because that hadn't been the goal. Not at first. Carter shifted his stance. "There's something else," he said. Daniel turned slightly. "What?" "The land," Carter said. "Your brother's claim, it's been reviewed. Legally, it's yours. No disputes left standing." Daniel looked back out at it. His land. Evan's land. All of it. "Water source confirmed too," Carter added. "That stream you followed. It feeds underground. Enough to sustain something out here." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Something," he repeated. Carter gave a small nod. "Up to you what that is." Silence settled between them again. Not heavy, not pressing. Just quiet. Carter stepped back after a moment. "We'll be around a few more days," he said. "After that, it's yours." Daniel nodded. "Appreciate it." Carter paused, then added, "Your brother would have too." Then he turned and walked back toward the vehicles parked in the distance. Daniel watched him go, then looked down at Atlas. The dog met his gaze, steady as ever. Daniel crouched slowly, resting his hand against the side of Atlas's neck. "You heard that?" he said. "It's ours." Atlas didn't react. Didn't need to. He had never cared about ownership. Only direction. Only purpose. Daniel stood again, turning in a slow circle, taking in the land one more time. The rise where he stood. The slope down toward the basin. The distant line of trees where the drainage path emerged. And beyond that, the canyon. Hidden now. Quiet again. But no longer a mystery. Daniel took a step forward, then another. Atlas moved with him. They walked down the slope together, boots and paws pressing into ground that felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because they had. At the base of the rise, a small structure had already begun to take shape. Nothing impressive. Just the start of something. Wood stacked. Tools laid out. A foundation marked. Daniel stopped there, looking at it. Simple. Solid. Real. Atlas moved ahead, circling once before settling near the edge of the foundation. Watching. Guarding. Daniel smiled slightly. Not wide, not loud, but real. A memory surfaced. Evan standing in a place like this, talking about building something that lasted. Daniel hadn't listened then. Not fully. He did now. A truck approached in the distance, slow this time, not rushing. Someone local, someone new. Or maybe someone who had always been there but never stepped forward before. Daniel didn't move. He didn't need to. Whatever came next, he was ready for it. A voice called out from the truck as it came closer. "You Mercer?" Daniel turned slightly. "That's right." The man nodded. "Name's Walker. I've got supplies. Heard you might be staying." Daniel glanced at the truck, then back at the land, then at Atlas. The dog looked up at him. Waiting. Always waiting for the next move. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "I'm staying." Walker smiled faintly. "Good," he said. "Place like this could use someone who knows how to hold it." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because he already understood something that he hadn't before. The gold in the canyon. It wasn't the point. The ledgers. Not the point. Even the truth. Not the end. Daniel looked down at Atlas again. At the dog who had refused to leave him, who had found the water, the path, the truth. "You were right," Daniel said quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. Daniel rested his hand on his head. "The treasure wasn't buried," he said. He looked out over the land one more time, then back down at the dog. "It was never lost." Atlas leaned into his hand. And for the first time since stepping into that canyon, Daniel Mercer felt something settle inside him. Not just relief, not just survival, but something steadier, something that didn't depend on what had been taken or what had been found, something that stayed. If you've ever been pushed aside or told something wasn't yours to keep, type yes if you'd stand your ground or no if you'd walk away. There's something about holding on to what's rightfully yours that speaks to a man's backbone. If stories like this mean something to you, go ahead and subscribe. We've got more real stories about grit, land, and quiet justice coming your way. Oh.